Well, welcome back to the podcast, Digitally Transformed. I'm your host, Melissa, and this week I have Phil Magnuszewski with me. He is the Chief Innovation Officer here at Infused Innovations. He's someone who, we've had on before, and he's extremely passionate about innovation. So today we're going to talk about innovation specifically in the healthcare industry and just the possibilities of what can exist and what does currently exist in that space. And I'm just excited to have you on here. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you so much for having me back on again. It's been a little while.
It's been a minute.
But yeah, great to be here, and I'm
Awesome.
excited.
Good. Thanks for coming on. There's been so much conversation surrounding innovation and how industries are quite literally changing and innovating day by day. So let's start here. Maybe you can give us some context into how quickly the industries are, this industry specifically is digitizing, and what this means for the healthcare industry as well as just, industries in general, how quickly things are changing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting time for all of us, right? Both in the tech universe as well as just people who aren't. Because you're seeing so many changes across so many technologies that are impacting people's lives today. And not just that there's a lot of net new tech out there too, right? But there's this acceleration effect that's happening right now. Things are changing so fast.
Yes.
And people are finding new ways to converge or bring or, use the concept of a mashup, bringing different technologies together in new and innovative ways that are really pushing kind of that needle forward for organizations and individuals for that matter.
Right.
If you take a look or think about what's happened over the previous, from the big dawn of time to where we are now, we've created all this content and all this, technological of innovation that's happened. But what we're going to see over the next 100 years is going to dwarf any of that. So we have there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's going to be a very compressed timeline where we're going to see a lot of this stuff really impact our lives.
Yeah, and it's scary and exciting at the same time to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. What are some of these like older legacy, systems or processes in our healthcare system that we're seeing that are becoming more streamlined or updated? Basically, where was this industry needing growth, and where is it finding that growth via innovation and technology?
Yeah, and not to offend any healthcare workers because it's not their fault, but the healthcare industry has woefully been behind from a technical perspective.
Yeah.
And anyone who works in it is keenly aware of that. So antiquated systems, old operating environments, systems that just don't talk to each other.
Right.
That whole model, that's kind of how we've been doing things forever. And there have been tweaks and things that have happened from here and there. Going from paper to electronic was a big move for the industry, which didn't happen that long ago.
It's 2022. I mean, come on.
It is. But what we're seeing now is this movement from being a reactive type model. So we call it sick care versus health care, right? Mm-hmm. So moving from a reactive model to a proactive model. There are technologies that are enabling you, Melissa, as an individual to take control of what's going on in your medical life, right? Being more proactive, doing the right things to keep yourself healthy versus only going to the doctor when you get sick. Right. So there's a huge fundamental change that's happening in the industry right now.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it's, being proactive versus reactive in the industry. What are some of the specific, I want some examples. What are some of these specific technologies that are being used to solve some of these problems in the healthcare system?
Oh my goodness, there's so many of them out there. And that's the one thing I will say is that the healthcare industry is really starting to catch up quickly. And in a lot of ways, it's going to get further ahead than a lot of other industries are. And you look at everything from data capture. A lot of it's about data, right? That's the biggest thing. It's all about healthcare is about data. The capturing of data. We're all familiar with our Fitbits and Apple Watches. That's tracking our counts, the amount of exercise we're doing, our heart rates, those kind of things as well. We have the Oura rings, right, which also helps track things like sleep, right? So we have all of these devices. If you're diabetic, you may have one of the newer patches that actually keeps a constant output of what your insulin level is, right?
Right.
And there's an IoT device, right, that's connected to your phone or whatever other application you might have that allows you to in real time kind of understand where you are with that. So we have a proliferation of, I'll say, edge devices that we're now able to use to track telemetry on what's going on with us, right? So that's really cool and that's really important. The next piece of that is the aggregation of that information, right? Do I have a place where I can pull all those things about Melissa together? Because it's one thing to kind of look at things in isolation, but when you're looking at a person from a holistic perspective, which you want to do, you want to get the full picture.
Right.
And just because her heart rate is up doesn't mean that it's good or bad, but when you connect that to something else, you get a better story, a better picture of what's going on at a particular moment in time.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it's so interesting that you're bringing all of this up because, when you and I said, oh yeah, let's talk about the healthcare industry, in my head, I'm just thinking like doctor's office, like hospitals, how are they storing data? Like what types of like tools and technologies are they using to evaluate, people who come in? But it is interesting, like you said, that proactive healthcare is a big piece of it. It's actually a pretty huge piece of it.
It's huge. And we got, over the past 2 and 3 years in particular, because of COVID, we got pushed in that direction in a lot of ways. So that kind of helped, I think, accelerate some of this stuff. But, AI is playing a huge part in all of this as well, right? It's one thing to collect data, but now how do I have an understanding of your history or a group of people based on a common background or a community of people? I can take a look and extrapolate and predict the spread of a virus, for example.
Right.
The use of AI and cognitive services, so looking at images. Back in 2020, there were a number of hospitals in China that were using AI computer vision models to look at x-rays to predict or understand who had COVID before all the tests and stuff became, more prevalent and us were able to do that. So they were using AI for that as well. So pretty interesting. And now the whole telehealth thing. Telehealth's been around for a while, but I think people are more comfortable either talking to their doctor remotely or, more recently is the whole concept of a chatbot as a doctor. Right? A lot of FAQ type stuff that a hospital or a doctor might use from an intake perspective. You can easily do that with a chatbot these days.
Yeah, I've even noticed that there's a lot of other apps and things out there that exist now that didn't before, where you can, it's basically just makes healthcare more accessible and easier to find, or you could even get prescriptions from like an app or online without even having to go in and see your doctor, which
I did that yesterday.
Oh, you did? Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, mind blown. It's all about it's also about like user experience and how incredible that is. Like how much time did you save? How much time did they save? It's wild the things that we can do.
Yeah.
We couldn't have done 5 years ago.
Absolutely right. And with that, it becomes closer and closer and closer to real time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you're sick. It could be day 1, day 2 of that. You may not be able to get a doctor's appointment for a week, 2 weeks. Right.
Right.
Now with doing this, you can call in. Even before like some of the applications, you can call in and talk to a nurse and that kind of thing. But you could also now log into an application. I work with Dartmouth Hitchcock up here in New England, real big medical system. Everything is online. I can schedule stuff there. I can see lab results. I can just see there's a whole bunch of things that you can do that you couldn't do before.
Right. And to piggyback off of that, when you have an instance where maybe there's a pandemic, right? And people don't have access to those things because it's just overcrowded and there's not enough people, right? That's when these kinds of technologies and apps can come in and help people, again, have that accessibility to medications and seeking out help. Wow. Well, it's awesome to talk about all of that. Why should an organization, right? Because a lot of who we work with is we work with businesses, we work with organizations, we advise them. So why should an organization, as well as people in general, right, be paying attention to this, but especially organizations be paying attention to innovation and why they should be innovating, particularly in the healthcare industry, because there are a lot of organizations that are innovating, but some aren't. And so why is it so important? And what would happen if they don't?
We go back to this, and we've had other conversations about this, Melissa, too. And I don't mean to put too fine a point on it, but I really do feel that it's innovate or die.
Yeah.
It's survival of the fittest, and the organizations who fail on the innovation front won't be here 5-10 years from now. Even if it's that long, it might even be sooner than that, because things are changing so quickly. There are startups, and I've been doing some work in the startup communities, both from a customer perspective, but also as a mentor perspective for some startups. And there is so much going on, and they get what these technologies and the applications of those technologies can do to an industry. Totally change that. So it's, in particular in healthcare, you're going to see tons and tons of startups over the next 3 to 5 years. Even organizations like Apple and Amazon and Google and Microsoft are starting to provide solutions in that space.
Oh,
so they're coming at it from a technology perspective and knowing what they know, bringing that onto the business side of things with healthcare, right? Imagine them coming in, understanding scalability and things around data protection and how to use AI, bringing all that to bear. You're going to see some really, I think, amazing things from companies like that.
Yeah. When you say it's innovate or die, I always kind of go back to just such a simple, easy example of this is like the Redbox DVDs and how like Hulu and Netflix has completely taken over. And then you wonder, you're like, what's going to take over in the next like 5 years, 10 years? But you can apply that to any industry or any situation and say like, yeah, I mean, you have to constantly be evolving and meeting the consumer's needs. Otherwise, they're just not going to be happy. And someone else is going to come along with the solution that they've been looking for. I want to ask, where do you see the healthcare industry in, let's say, 5 years or 10 years or gosh, 20 years? 20 years doesn't feel like that far away, but when we think about how we were using dial-up like 20 years ago and where we are now, it sort of trips me out to think like, wow, another 20 years, what's it going to be?
Yeah, I don't even know if I can predict or see what 20 years, because things are changing so fast. I don't even know if there's a way I could imagine what that looks like. But it will have to do, and what you'll see, the impact will be on longevity, right? We'll live longer as part of that, but also the quality of life. The ability for us to do very personalized medicine or healthcare for people is going to be the biggest improvement we're going to see in our lifetimes. And that means that's not just, hey, it's easier to make an appointment, right? It's Melissa understanding specifically how her DNA is put together, right? What do her genetics look like? What works specifically for Melissa, right? Might not work for Phil, obviously, right? So that includes diet, the amount of exercise, the type of nutrients you need to take in, the type of medications you at an individual level. And they're doing with all of the quantum computing that's coming out now, and even the supercomputers using now, the ability to crack that genetic code and do it more quickly and at a lower cost makes that easier. We've seen it in cancer research recently, having more personalized approaches to doing cancer treatments. And you're just going to see that expand into all the other areas of our lives. I think that's the biggest and most interesting and most, positive thing I think we're going to see in our lifetimes when it comes to healthcare.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense, because I think at least the more that I uncover and learn about health is that, like you said, everyone is so different, right? Like I got my blood tested a year ago and found out all these things about myself and all these foods that are supposed to be, they're whole foods, they're healthy, but like my particular blood type, I shouldn't be consuming it because of this or that, so it just, you get this like custom holistic view of your health and you're like, wow. And so I'm just excited to see what other technologies and products and things come out. I mean, even when you think about like the Apple Watch, you're sitting down and it's like, stand up, time to breathe, time to get up. Like, you haven't hit your workout today. That kind of stuff is monumental.
It's true. And it's, we're going to have all these things. There are other technologies too, like 3D printing. When we get more sophisticated 3D printing, think about prosthetics and things that we can do like in your own home or at a local, healthcare facility. the ability to have those printed out and easily accessible to people at cost as well. But you talk about the Aura Ring and having the ability to triangulate and take a look at you as an individual. You may wake up in the morning and running a fever, and you may talk to your Alexa and say, Alexa, because it's backed by Amazon Health, right? Alexa,
my Alexa just went off. Alexa, stop.
Like, Alexa, what's my, what do I do for my fever? And, it may respond in a certain way, and you may follow certain instructions, but throughout the course of the day, you'll have check-ins in various forms to kind of, again, triangulate what might be going on with you at any given point in time.
Yeah, and actually, just another quick little example of this. 2 years ago, right before the onset of COVID, my son had like a really bad, I think he actually probably did have it. He was really sick, and I went to the store and I bought a thermometer because I didn't have one, and it was a digital thermometer, and with it was an app. And I would take his temperature, and then the temperature would upload to the app. And you would take their temperature every like hour or two, to monitor them depending on where they're at.
Yeah.
And it would give you actual suggestions like, you should be concerned. You should probably see a doctor, or like, this is normal. This is okay. And I was blown away by that, and again, back to like the accessibility thing. It's like, if let's say someone couldn't afford healthcare, or they didn't have healthcare, not to say that this is a substitute by any means, but just some of these technologies are just incredible and really helpful and make healthcare and healing more accessible to people.
And the whole point behind it is to prevent things from happening, right? And so you're not just going to the doctor because you're sick or because something happened, but you're doing the things to prevent that from happening even in the first place.
Yes. Okay, so I want to ask you, what are some great resources and tools for those who are in the healthcare industry that are, watching technology just completely revolutionize everything?
Yeah.
And they're just sort of in the backseat, like wondering how can I stay up to date with what's happening? How can I maybe even partake in this? How can I influence my organization to start, implementing some of these technologies? What resources or tools would you provide for them?
Yeah, so obviously you can come take a look at the stuff that we put out, right? We're constantly taking a look at what's happening in different industries, and we'll promote those things, and we'll write something on a topic with that. But outside of that, a lot of your big consulting firms are putting out really good white papers on what's going on, like predictions for what's coming out in 2022 and beyond. So there are a lot of white papers that you can Google and find that way. HIMSS, which is a National Organizations for Health Information Systems, does a really good job at pulling that healthcare group together, and they do a lot of promotion around what's going on in industry, not just from a tech perspective, but also the practical applications of some of these things too. So HIMSS is actually a great resource for folks to kind of stay up to speed on.
Oh, cool. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Phil. Honestly, it was it's always so interesting and fun to just talk about innovation, because whether you're an organization or whether you're, someone who's just a human who's having a life experience, right? And you're just sort of watching technology just revolutionize your world and your everyday. It's just so fascinating, and it's just always really fun to talk about.
It is, and it's again, it's changing so fast. But yeah, it's fun to be able to talk about this and to share kind of the things that we're learning. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And if you're listening to this and you are looking for an organization to partner with that can help you sort of see these possibilities in your industry, or just for your organization, reach out to us. We are always happy to chat with you. And that's all for this week.
Thanks, Melissa.